Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Quiz time, everybody's favorite. We are in the Parshiot concerning Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus from Egypt. So let's do a quick check. The first plague against Egypt was?
Blood.
What's that?
The rivers. Blood.
Blood. Right, very good. Let's do another easy one. The last plague against Egypt was? The firstborn. The ninth plague, also known as the penultimate plague, was? Choshech, which is? Darkness. Darkness? What kind of progression are we working with here? We start off with something inconvenient and a little shocking, but not exactly terrible, the blood and the water. We move our way through swarms of frogs and locusts. We have hail coming down, fiery and icy. We've got boils, wild animals, cattle disease. We've got all sorts of major things happening during the middle portion of the plagues. I'm not going to ask you to put them in order. And then God unleashes darkness. I mean, that's kind of a letdown. Honestly, if this was, a movie and this was the scene right before the big climax, we'd all be saying, couldn't you have done that earlier? Like maybe right after the blood, then you have red and black, and those are really nice contrasting colors, and that would have been really cool visually. But who's going to be scared of dark? I mean, I'm scared of falling things from the sky. I'm scared of swarms of locusts. I'm scared of my body breaking out in horrible boils. But, oh no, who turned out the lights? Quick, let's let the Israelites go. It seems kind of a strange, almost final plague, of penultimate plague. Now, our tradition does offer an explanation that fits perfectly of why Choshech, the plague of darkness, was right there. And that was, this was cleanup time, by which our tradition meant, you may have wondered, how it was that all the Israelites left the land of Egypt, because after all, were they all worthy of redemption? Well, say our tradition of the Midrash, no, they weren't. That many of the Israelites had succumbed to idolatry wholeheartedly and the immorality of Egypt, and they were corrupted through and through, and God had no intention of letting them ride the coattails of the better ones out the door. But he didn't want to leave them behind because, well, that would look like God was somehow incapable of rescuing all of the Israelites, and he didn't want to get rid of them while everyone else was looking, because that would look like God was equally angry with the Israelites as he was with the Egyptians. So God just said, all right, we're going to turn out the lights. And when he turned them back on, nobody paid attention to all the missing people. And God got rid of all of the terrible, irredeemable Israelites during that period. That a whole bunch of them just went bye-bye in the Choshech, in the darkness. And that fits, because then the next plague comes, and then we leave, and that way we don't have these hanger-ons. That would be problematic. Not exactly a pretty image. That's why God turned the lights out. But also it's not entirely satisfying, which is why our tradition always has more than one explanation for something like this. Because after all, if those were the worst ones, well, how much worse could they be than the ones we were stuck with? Because after all, in just about 3 months' time, most of them are going to be bowing down and worshiping a golden calf. And they're going to be complaining before then about not wanting to go through the sea. And they're going to be complaining after that about not having all of the wonderful food they used to get as slaves in the land of Egypt. If those were the good ones, were there really people worse than that? And so I would like to advance an alternative explanation that when you get to that ninth plague, both in your own personal study of Torah as well as at your own Seder, and you are preparing to take that extra drop, that if it is not filling you with the same amount of dread as all of the other plagues, consider what it might have been intending to mean. Because this plague of darkness was not just turning out the lights. According to the Torah, this was darkness you could touch, which our tradition takes to mean that this was darkness that could not be overcome by just lighting a lamp. that normal darkness, when the sun goes down, all you have to do is make a campfire, light a candle, or usually in those days have an oil lamp. And yeah, it wasn't as good as the sun, but you'd be okay. But this darkness was impenetrable. No amount of oil lamps or campfires or anything else allowed someone to see that this darkness was inescapable. It was palpable darkness. And that was there to teach the Egyptians something, to help them realize something that they had been missing this entire time. Because that was what the Israelites felt like during their century plus of slavery. That they were in a darkness that couldn't be illuminated. That they were trapped within a night that had no promise of a dawn and could not be alleviated by any means that they had access to. They were trapped as slaves. They were forced to work. They were forced to watch their children die. They were forced to have no hope. They were in the deepest pit of depression, of sadness, of hopelessness, and of bitterness. They were in a darkness that could not be alleviated. And I don't think the Egyptians quite understood that. Because if you haven't been in a position where it doesn't feel like you will ever escape darkness, it's hard to truly sympathize. It's hard to truly understand what that feeling is like. To know that no matter how hard you strike those stones, no matter how many matches you try to use, that it's not going to get any brighter, is a stark feeling that many of us have felt at one point or another, but some have not. And it's very easy from the outside to blame the person in that impenetrable darkness. Why don't you just light a light? Turn on the lights, light a candle. What's so bad? Why are you complaining about how you feel depressed and sad and miserable all the time? Just feel better. Have you tried being happy instead of being sad? Have you tried doing fun things so you don't feel depressed? As if it was that easy. As if darkness of the spirit can be so easily overcome just by turning on a light switch. Oh, I'll go see a movie and now all my problems are better. Now I don't feel bad at all. Now my depression, my sadness, my bitterness, my despair, my hopelessness, all of that is gone because I'm playing miniature golf like you suggested. Why didn't I think of this earlier? Do fun things and I won't feel bad. But the Egyptians had that attitude of the Israelites because there is a condescension among those who hold others as slaves towards their slaves, believing that the slaves are properly slaves. Because if they weren't naturally inclined to servitude, why are they slaves? If they really didn't want to be slaves, why hadn't all the Israelites left before now? Why hadn't they put up more of a fight? Why weren't they storming the palace of Pharaoh with their rocks and their mud bricks and demanding their freedom? No, they let us kill their kids. They let us terrorize them. Some people are just like that. They're not really putting in the effort to change their situation, so they'll just stay where they are. If they wanted to be free, if they wanted to escape their darkness, they would have turned on a light by now. And so, our enslavement of them is perfectly moral and justified, because what kind of people are these? I mean, what can you do with them? The best we can do is, hey, we're feeding them, we're giving them a place to live. We're not letting them breed like rats, because, I mean, after all, we're not stupid. But if they were real people, if they were like us, they would have already escaped their darkness. They would have already thrown off their shackles, because I wouldn't let anyone put me in bondage. I wouldn't let myself be a slave. And so God gave them a taste of the darkness that the Israelites had felt. A darkness that cannot be penetrated by turning on a light. A hopelessness that cannot be escaped by some simple platitude or conventional wisdom or advice from somebody who doesn't understand what it is that the person is going through. For 3 days, the Egyptians knew despair. They didn't know how long the darkness would go. They didn't know what would happen. They had no idea whether there was something even more terrible coming in the darkness that they couldn't see. All they knew was they were helpless and that they had no hope. That was what the Israelites and all people who suffer in this type of darkness feel routinely. And yet, when God lifted the darkness from them, Pharaoh continued to be stubborn and refused to let our people go. And so we ended up with the 10th plague as well. But even if it was ineffectual at swaying the Egyptian opinion for what they were doing, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow, it doesn't mean we can't learn from it. That when we come across somebody who is in the midst of a difficult situation, who feels hopeless or sad or depressed or despairing, don't just tell them to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. Don't tell them, oh, you just got to get a hold of yourself and man up. Don't tell them, there's nothing worth crying about it. Tears never solved anything. Have a little sympathy. Have a little compassion. You may not be able to solve their problem. In fact, their problem may be more difficult than turning a light switch on. But your presence, that can make a huge difference. Standing by them in their darkness, letting them know that you are there for them and that you will do whatever they need you to do, not what you think they ought to do, to help themselves make it through this period of night in their life. That can make a real difference. Be careful when you see someone in darkness. Trust me, they've already thought about lighting a light. That's not what they're looking for. They need a friend. They need someone to stand with them until they can find their way to the dawn. Shabbat Shalom.